Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Monica and I are switching it up for the month of February, so I get to do this first part, which is really cool. I had to ask her how to do it at the beat earlier. I was like, wait, what's the order again? Because I don't really know it. I was just like getting in the zone, and now I'm like, okay, I got it. Couple of announcements. First, to those of you who came up to me during the coffee hour beforehand, excited about the mindfulness group, that makes me so excited. However, it starts on the 19th. So February 19th, we are going to be hosting, we're shifting the mindfulness group from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and it's going to be in the upstairs parlor area and online. So if you're watching online, you can also join the mindfulness group at 10. It actually starts at 10:10 technically, gives you a little time to get up there. Starts on February 19th. Also, teal hymnals. These right here. You may have remembered all of the little pennants that were on the side, and we were like, hey, take one down and buy one for the congregation. They're finally here. So if you purchased one, it is out there, and it has a little card with your name inside of it saying, thank you so much. Please come and get it. And when you do, bring it in here and place it in a pew and bring back one of the ones that has a little number on it. These are actually, we've borrowed them from the choir. They're very generous folks, but even they have a tolerance level. They want them back. So also there are a few more for sale out there. You can just scan, there's a little QR code. You can just scan the QR code, do the drop down for the hymnal, and you can buy one if you didn't buy one before, and it helps us put these new hymnals in the pews. The music's amazing, so thank you for doing that. A new member class starts this Wednesday on Zoom, 7 p.m. Stop by the welcome table out here, or you can talk to Bill or Christine Ashworth, or you can talk or email Monica, and we can get you all set up with that new member class. We're going to have a joining ceremony in March. March. We don't know the date because we're preaching, and nothing gets in our brains on preaching days. But it's happening in March. If you'd like to become a member here, please join the new member class. During coffee hour, the environmental ministry is hosting the postcard project that you've been seeing. There's ones with lines on it where you can write words, and there's ones with no lines where you can draw pictures. Not exclusive for children. You can draw a picture if you like. There's also a press conference that's happening about the Great Salt Lake on the 16th of February, 9 a.m. up at the Capitol building. And we are still looking for a few people who would like to join the vigil that's happening during the legislative session out on Antelope Island. Jim Turner has lent us a camper, and there's other people out there vigiling. So you can talk to Kathy Chambliss or Joan. The search committee, just an update, has 3 amazing candidates. Oh, I'm so sorry. That would be crazy if there were 3 candidates. They are 3 amazing pre-candidates, and they're in the process right now. They've gone from the total number of applicants down to these 3, and they're doing a deep dive with each of these 3. They're super excited about all of them. Then they will present one candidate to you in April. Very exciting. We're getting closer and closer to the new called minister. Stay tuned. We would like to welcome Ogden. Hello, Ogden. So glad you're here with us today. If you want to join the mindfulness group, come on at 10 o'clock. And our lay minister today is Beck Miller. Thank you for being with us today, Beck. So as we step into Black History Month, we are reminded that on April 25th, 1619, there was a ship named the White Lion that arrived at Port Comfort, ironically, now known as Fort Monroe National Monument in Hampton, Virginia. The ship contained enslaved Africans, and it is the first recorded arrival of Africans in America, in the United States. These words come from the Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper, the minister in Barnstable, Massachusetts. How do we mark that first day, that hour, that minute the White Lion docked at a point that would be of no comfort to the 20 enslaved Africans chained in her bowels? Heralds of a coming storm of millions whose bodies would break through soil and rock to build an America that could never fully embrace its progenitors. How do we mark that day, that hour, that minute that foreshadowed the centuries of degradation, violence, of attempts to separate the soul and spirit from the deep well of Black lives? How do we mark that day, that hour, that minute, 400 years ago, when the first drop of African sweat commingled with the earth's warmth, planting the seeds of a new culture, a new way of life, a new heartbeat into the fabric of a new world? When the roots of freedom sparked deep underground and spread from generation to generation, blossoming into resistance and resilience. So today, we will ring bells of sorrow, bells of grief, bells of atonement. We will ring out the ghosts of those lost in the Middle Passages, lost to the whips and deprivation, lost to the lynchings and the bullets, lost to the prisons and the chains of racism. Today, we will ring bells so that tomorrow we may ring in freedom, ring in liberation, ring in peace. Please join in singing our first hymn. It is 1020, 1020, Woyaya.
In May of 2016, a friend of mine called me up to ask for help. She said she was trying to petition Salt Lake County, her employer, to choose a healthcare package that would help subsidize the burden of transgender-related healthcare. She asked if I would be willing to give personal testimony before Salt Lake County financial officials to help them decide whether or not they would be willing to provide their employees with this life-saving and sometimes cost-prohibitive coverage. She said the county wanted as many trans people as possible to give testimony so that they could understand the breadth and validity of the need. I agreed to show up because they did not have any trans men working for the county who were willing to discuss their trans-related healthcare needs. Most of my testimony consisted of me explaining the heavy financial burden of transgender healthcare without coverage. At the time of my top surgery, it cost me nearly $7,000, a number that is almost certainly higher today because it's a decade later, between the cost of the surgery and revisions, not including expenses associated with taking a month off of work. These costs were completely out of pocket and represented nearly every penny I had in the world at the time. I also testified to how life-altering and wonderful these changes were for my personal well-being and happiness. My life had completely changed for the better, and the surgery was a necessity. I learned a lot when I was asked to answer this call for help. I listened to several different testimonies from not only adults seeking health care, but also to the experiences of a young dependent of a Salt Lake County employee. She was an 11-year-old trans girl who was taking hormone blockers in order to put a pause on her puberty. She testified that this allowed her time to think about what physical changes she actually wanted or needed. This pause was absolutely critical as she, her parents, and mental health providers and endocrinologists deliberated on the safest path forward for her life and her identity. In the end, our detailed testimonies were enough to convince the county officials to pay for transgender health care coverage for county employees. And my friend and this little girl's family were able to stave off the incredibly expensive costs associated with that care. A few days after they announced their decision, my friend and I rejoiced, but we also discussed how revolutionary this kind of healthcare access and approach was, and how envious we were that this young girl had the privilege of starting out her life without the damage of her family and healthcare providers shaming and denying her that care. Why does this matter that I'm sharing this story with you right now? It's because a little more than a week ago, on January 28th, the Utah State Legislature passed 3 anti-trans bills directed at minors. The bills effectively deny transgender children under the age of 18 from receiving cross-hormone therapy and hormone blockers, and will also prevent them from amending their gender on their birth certificates until the age of 18. Governor Cox was a coward and did not veto that legislation. He signed the bills into law along with the congressional supermajority and made these laws effective immediately. It may seem counterintuitive to make a plea to anyone, especially now that the legislative damage has already been done. Nevertheless, I do not have the ear of an entire Utah Congress. Besides writing my senators and representatives, the best I can do is to share my experiences among the people that are around me and insist at the top of my voice that a terrible and grievous injustice has been committed. My concern is not that I want every trans child to transition. It's not always the right course of action for a person to transition as a minor. Nevertheless, what I am deeply distraught about is that the option of this care has been so aggressively taken away. What will happen to the lives of trans children in this state? including one in my immediate care, who are being legally denied the opportunity to seek gender confirmation care. They are so vulnerable. And my greatest fear is that we might lose a single one of them to the incredible anxiety and depression that comes from living with gender incongruence and dysphoria. It is additionally galling to feel like the legislature is doing this to stop a literal handful of trans children from playing in high school sports. It is a travesty that this is their concern, with children's mental health and lives at stake. I know changes don't always happen overnight, and I also know that justice doesn't always come on time. That is not the state of the world we live in. However, I know from my own experience that hearts and minds don't change unless you say something when you can, even with people who don't agree with you. I've had the privilege of answering the call of injustice more than once, and I beg each and every one of you to answer mine. Defend trans health care for minors to whomever will listen. Social change will not come without your voice and your understanding. Please answer the call. Amen.
I invite you to close your eyes, breathe. Let's just breathe for a moment. Beck invited us into a deeply vulnerable space, and we might be tempted to race towards problem solving or even overwhelm. But before we race away from what we're feeling, let's just take a moment and breathe. Just breathe. Allowing what was shared to settle within us and become part of who we are. If you're willing, perhaps with your eyes still closed, begin to explore what you are feeling. You don't necessarily need to add labels, although that's okay if it's helpful. Just allow yourself to connect with your body. There's a deep wisdom within your body that is calling us to join the lived experiences of love, compassion, and connection to the world around us. The people, the animals, and the earth. So for a moment, just breathe and rest in your body, noticing, if you can, this deep wisdom, this calling for communion. Feel free to open your eyes if you like. The eighth principle, as proposed by the leaders of the Unitarian Universalist Association, is an invitation to journey towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, that's a lot of words, but for me, the principle is clear. The goal is spiritual wholeness. The context is that spiritual wholeness cannot be achieved as individuals or as institutions unless we have rooted out the prejudices we have inherited from our culture, prejudices that live within each of us as a virus might. And most importantly, the mark of spiritual wholeness is not words or feelings, but actions and accountability. But actions and accountability without transformation often lead to superficial efforts, as evidenced by the last few decades of work within the UUA. We read so many books, we attended so many lectures we gave, or went to so many workshops, hoping that we would learn the right knowledge, believing that information was enough. All of these efforts stayed safely within the realm of the intellect, within the realm of right and wrong, within the realm of us and them. Journeying towards spiritual wholeness means we must dive into the body and witness to what is lying beneath the veneer of our conscious and intellectual world. When we begin to explore the richness within our bodies with curiosity instead of fear of what we might find, everything shifts. Now, a faith that overemphasizes emotion can lead to a lack of critical thinking, accepting ideas without proper examination, and it can leave people vulnerable to manipulation. And a faith that overemphasizes the intellect often confuses pity with empathy, focuses on the process instead of solidarity, and disconnects people from the embodied experience, leaving them isolated from the rest of life. The journey towards spiritual wholeness is walked by pilgrims willing to incorporate the wisdom found in the head and in the heart. Transformation is not an unbridled emotional experience, nor does it come from reading the latest book. It is an integration of fact and emotion that leaves us compelled, called to make a change in our world. We're going to rest for a few more moments of meditation guided by David's beautiful music. I invite you to breathe And as you breathe, I invite you to feel. What is calling to you? What seed of transformation is seeking the sunlight, growing from the rich spiritual humus of your body? This may be new and unfamiliar to some of you, but don't worry, don't force anything. Just breathe and allow the wisdom to emerge from the depths on its own. The offertory will now be gratefully accepted. As you give by either putting money in the plate or using this card to give online, I invite you to think about what this place means to you, what our mission is here. What is it that we're supporting? There is no place that's quite like this one, and it is important that we share who we are with the world. Thank you for your generosity.
There's another beautiful sermon happening right outside the windows. I hope you'll hold off listening to that one for just 20 minutes, okay? Our theme for the month of February is calling. This week's calling is a call to the present moment of our church community. Next week, we will listen for a call that comes from our past. And the following week, a call into the future of Unitarian Universalism. Now, I haven't decided yet what I'm preaching on the 26th, but with sermons on past, present, and future, I'm feeling like there should be some fourth dimension of time that we could focus on then. And they don't teach that in seminary. That is not my jam. So we'll just find out what happens on the 26th. I don't know. We'll see. Now, this month, last year, we also talked about calling, but we focused on how we experience calling as individuals. This year, we're thinking about how we experience our calling as a church community. And we've covered this territory before. Let me set the stage for you. In February of 2020, yes, just about a month before the pandemic hit, I spoke to you from this pulpit about what was then the upcoming ministerial transition, what was going to happen, what the timeline looked like, and I don't know if you can remember it, but I gave everyone these pink hearts, and I invited you to write on that heart what you loved most about that church. Can anybody remember that? Yeah. Then I collected them, and my plan was to do some kind of installation like what you see hanging above you. I set the stack on my desk until I could cut them out and kind of make them look pretty. But you know what happened instead. Within a month, the world was shut down. I could have made an art project, but nobody would have seen it. And one day, after I was back working in the office again, I found myself missing y'all. And I looked over and I saw these hearts, and so I unwrapped the rubber band and looked through them one at a time. And some were sweet and some were funny. Here's one that says, "Not having to do chores on Sunday." I guess it was an intergenerational, or maybe y'all don't do chores. I don't know. I do laundry on Sunday. So anyway, one word kept leaping out at me. Kept appearing again and again: community. About a third of the hearts included the word community, and about a dozen had just that one word. And in my lonesome state, that really moved me. And it also got me thinking, what do we even mean when we say community? What is it we value that we communicate with that word? The more I thought about it, the more it made me itch. It started to sit with me like a word that you write down and you know you spelled it right, but it looks wrong anyway. And like the longer you look at it, the wronger it looks. Well, that itch has stuck with me all this time until this year I decided I'm going to answer this question one way or the other. My sense was that when people say community, they're talking about a feeling more than a thing. And I think that what started this itch was actually the pandemic, right? We didn't realize what we had until we missed it. Community became so much more valuable when we no longer had it. Well, during the pandemic, I got very excited about taking care of my health. That was my particular outlet for managing my pandemic zoomies. Everybody had something. Probably some of y'all still have your sourdough starters, right? We all had something. For me, it was taking care of my health. So I started taking supplements. I bought an exercise bike, which I am still using. It is not a clothes hanger. Anyway, you know, what happens when you get interested in something is that Facebook gets interested in what you're interested in and starts helpfully suggesting things. And one of the things it suggested to me was something called a Shakti mat. Has anybody heard of this? It kind of looks like the pad that goes under a sleeping bag, but it's covered all over with these pointy spikes. And you're supposed to lay down on it, and it pokes you all over and it increases your circulation. So there's different levels of spikes. There's the beginner spikes that hurt you just a little bit, all the way up to the expert spikes that I suppose are for people who've worked their way up on the bunny mat. I know, it sounds like a torture device, and it probably is. And I guess now I'm the kind of person who goes in for that kind of thing. Well, so I navigate to the website to see how much money I'm going to lay out for this torture. I just want to say here, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it. I'm still thinking about it, but I haven't done it yet. Anyway, you know what happens when you go to a website these days? This little pop-up box that wants your email address so it can send you coupons for the rest of your life. And this pop-up box says, can you guess? Join the Shakti Mat community. Evidently, there's a whole community of people who like to lay down on pointy spikes. Who knew? But this happens to me all the time. Maybe you too. I'm always being invited to join a community based on what product I'm shopping for. But I'm skeptical about communities that supposedly coalesce around commercial products. That's a pretty low bar for community. Buy our product, give us your email address, bam, community. It seems like there should be something more holding a community together, don't you think? Community, you see, has become very cheap. When it seems to me that community is not something you can buy at all. So we tend to qualify our intentions by saying that what we mean is that we want real community. And in fact, we are desperate for real community. We can see what fake community looks like, but can we always recognize real community? How do we know when it's real? Some of you were lucky enough to come up in this wonderful tradition of Unitarian Universalism. But many of us came from someplace else. Some of us grew up without religion and felt an urge as adults to find something more. Many of you came from other religious traditions, some of which were nurturing and helpful, and you may still feel fondly towards them or even have brought them with you into this faith. But many of you came here because you discovered that you no longer felt you belonged in the faith of your beginnings. Perhaps you realized that you could no longer accept the beliefs of that group and remain in integrity. Or perhaps that group required you to cut off some essential part of your identity, pretend you were someone you were not. Or perhaps you simply felt a call toward a greater love and found yourself misunderstood or held back by the fears of others. In all these cases, what we yearn for is belonging, which, after all this itchy time, is what I think we really mean when we say we want community. We want to belong. We want that feeling of belonging. It is one of the most powerful urges by which humans are drawn. And what I notice here is the texture of community. On one end of the spectrum is the thin community of an email list, right? And on the other is the thick, too thick community of a group built around conformity and compliance. In a thick community, you feel like you can't breathe, you can't move, you can't see the sunshine or feel your own feelings. But somewhere in between is a sweet spot that's not too thick and not too thin, where real belonging can happen. And that's what we're aiming for. Brené Brown says of her research on the experience of belonging that fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. In fact, fitting in is one of the greatest barriers to belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are. But notice what else she says. When a group or community doesn't tolerate dissent and disagreement, it forgoes any experience of inextricable connection. There is no true belonging, only an unspoken treaty to hate the same people. This fuels our spiritual crisis of disconnection. Sometimes I will hear Unitarian Universalists say that they came here seeking a group of like-minded people, and I get that. When you live or work in a place where most of the people you interact with don't get you, when the lawmakers who create the conditions for living here seem to operate with a completely alien set of values, when you want to make the world a better place and your efforts feel so lonely or even futile, when your spirit is crushed and every day feels like an uphill battle, you just want to go someplace where the people do get you, someplace where you aren't so alone, where you can have a productive conversation, where you can work with others toward a common goal, where there's a basis for trust. And trust is the foundation of real community. Trust is the substance of connection and belonging, and it thickens the experience of community. And I want to challenge you that we can't stay there. Listen again to Dr. Brown's warning. When a group or community doesn't tolerate dissent or disagreement, it forgoes any experience of inextricable connection. There is no true belonging, only an unspoken treaty to hate the same people. We can appreciate the trust of a community of like-minded people, but when that trust becomes too thick and we start bonding more over who we exclude than over who we include, we've gone too far. Brown points to dissent and disagreement as elements that can thin a community that's gotten too thick, but really what I think she's getting at is diversity, right? Diversity is a high stated goal for Unitarian Universalists, but what we often think of is a group of people who look different and sound different and come from different backgrounds, but all think alike. Like-minded, right? And that's not really diversity, is it? Real diversity means that all those different backgrounds that we come from make us think differently about the world and have the potential to introduce dissent and disagreement into our life together. Real diversity, as Brown puts it, requires us to be vulnerable, get uncomfortable, and learn how to be present with people without sacrificing who we are. Listen to this again. It's so good. To learn how to be present with people without sacrificing who we are. We want true belonging, but it takes tremendous courage. Or, as our UUA president, the Reverend Dr. Susan Frederick Gray, puts it, one of the challenges of a big tent faith like ours is that we try to find the commonality among all of us, and we avoid talking about difference. But real multiculturalism happens in the exploration of difference. There's tremendous relief in finding a place where people get you. But remember that when you came here, you were the element of difference. For us to be truly welcoming, for us to foster community, we have to create for others the same sense of belonging that was created for us when we were new, even if the now new ones have a very different experience from our own. Always opening wider, always expanding the circle, always looking for the growing edge and increasing our capacity to welcome the unfamiliar. Our lay minister came to us today with a story about how difference is shaping his life. He spoke to us about a deep grief he is experiencing, and I am sure that he could not have done it if he didn't trust this community to hold his grief. And I know that there are others here who needed to hear those words. I needed to hear those words. Actually, all of us need to hear them, because even if you don't know anyone in your life who is trans, even if you don't know anyone else who is holding this particular grief, consenting to hold an unfamiliar grief enlarges you and enriches this community. Over the years, we've built something here that is so much more powerful than a group of like-minded people. This is a community of like-hearted people who prioritize our shared values over shared beliefs and ideas. A community of like-minded people feels safe for the insider, but only a community of like-hearted people can hold the lamentation and celebration of this precious life. I want to close with words by George Odell that I often use in memorial services that speak to the power of community. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted, when we are in trouble and afraid, when we despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. In the hour of our successes, when we look for someone to share our triumphs, and in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and rise again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives, we are in need, and others are in need of us. Amen. Would you rise with me once more and let's sing together number 1012.
Thank you.
Please be seated. Three years ago, I invited you to write your gratitude for this community on these hearts. And today, I'm giving you your hearts back. Each heart came from someone in this community to whom this place means something important. My invitation to you is to take this heart and put it somewhere where you will see it often and can reflect on it. It might carry a sentiment that resonates with you. It might say something you've never thought about before. It might even say something with which you disagree. Whatever you get, I hope that when you look at it over the next days and weeks, that you'll contemplate all the many reasons why people treasure this community, how it can mean so many things to so many different people, and the beauty in all that diversity. For now, we extinguish our chalice, the flame that's carried us through this hour, the flame that lights our way from week to week, the flame of our shared community that provides light and hope for the world.
Thank you all for coming today. Please join us for coffee and snacks right out here. You can sign a postcard for the Great Salt Lake to urge people on Thank you so much, David, Monica. And we have a wonderful person up in the nest up there helping our dear Tristan. His name is Palmer. Hey, Palmer. Thank you, everyone who's joined us online, and particularly the people from the UU Church in Ogden. Thank you so much. All right, come on out and then enjoy this beautiful thing, right?